Hello, Neogenians. Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. Today, we're answering the question, is there a universal truth underlying all world religions? And could that be truth? Could that truth be used to unite all religions and create world peace? So we're going to be taking a look at this idea. And additionally, we're going to be taking a look at the idea of why is this so feared in terms of Christianity as well? People often associate a one world religion with the end times and the apocalypse. So what's going on there? Why is there so much fear surrounding it? So that's what we're talking about today. It's going to be really good. And as always, my friends, if you enjoy my work, please like and subscribe so that we can spread this information, and consider becoming a Patreon member or member on YouTube by hitting the join button right below this video. You get access to weekly members only videos, our Discord server, a lot of great stuff. Hit the join button to check it out and see what you get. I want to remind you that my new book is available right now, Meta-Rationalism, the New Science of Mind. Hey, if you want to know about the mathematical nature of reality, how we can know that you are an eternal being in a rational and logical way, check it out. It's available on Amazon right now. And you can also, check it out by just looking at the link in the description of this video. All right, so let's take a look at this idea of there being a single unifying truth behind all religion. Now, I'm an ex-Christian. I grew up in a strict religious household, and the idea of a one world religion or unifying religion was seen as a terrible, sinful, anti-Christian concept, and is associated with the end of the world, the end times, the Antichrist, and the apocalypse. But I want you to know, isn't it strange that the idea of unity is associated with fear and evil? You'll notice this is a very common theme in Christianity, is to associate anything that is progressive or empowering or unifying with evil. You see that immediately, the tree of knowledge is the fall of man. It's what caused the fall of humanity. It's considered the original sin. According to Christianity, the reason why every human being is going to go to hell unless they ask for forgiveness is because Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. Lucifer is also associated with knowledge because he's associated with the serpent in the garden that tempted Eve to eat from the tree. Also associated with the epitome of evil. And then you have ideas like a one world religion being associated with the Antichrist. So modern Christianity is really a system of division and fear and hatred, which is completely antithetical to what religion should be about. But unfortunately, mainstream religions are extremely divisive. And so when we look at all the problems going on in the world today, you can look at all the crazy stuff going on in America, all the crazy stuff going on in the Middle East, all over the place. I'm not naming specific things because I don't want YouTube to flag this, but you know what's going on. So many of these issues are rooted in religion. So religion is at the heart of so much death and violence and hatred in the world today. What can we do about this? So there's this idea that there is a universal, singular truth that underlies all religion. And can we use that? First of all, is that true? And if so, can we use that to unite the world? Is it possible to use that to unite the world, to unite religion? And not only unite religion, but we're going to be talking about how we can unite it with science as well. Because, well, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to be taking a look. So there's a really good article that I want to take a look at. And as usual, this is from medium.com. Great website. Love it. And this particular author is really good. I highly recommend that you check him out. His name is Graham Pemberton. Graham Pemberton. And we're going to be reading some excerpts from one of his articles called The Perennial Philosophy in Christianity. So if you enjoy some of the excerpts that I read here today, go give him a follow over on medium.com and check out his articles because he writes a lot of really good ones. And he's all about reforming Christianity, transforming Christianity, which is something that we're going to be talking about. So basically what this article is, and I'll tell you why I'm going to be quoting some excerpts from it. What it is that someone wrote an article saying that all religions don't have an underlying unifying truth, that they do not. And so Graham is responding to this, and he wants to say that there is. So we're going to look at both sides here and see what the truth is and really unpack it and find out, what is that underlying truth. So this is called the perennial philosophy. What is a perennial philosophy? Well, if we look at the definition, a perennial philosophy is a school of thought in philosophy and spirituality, which posits that the recurrence of common themes across world religions illuminates universal truths about the nature of reality, humanity, ethics, and consciousness. Some perennialists emphasize common themes in religious experiences, while others argue that religious traditions share a single metaphysical truth or origin from which all esoteric and exoteric knowledge and doctrine has grown. So basically, perennial philosophy says, hey, behind all world religions, there is an underlying, hidden, esoteric truth. And so, I think that's pretty obvious. That's what we're talking about today. I did a video previously on a 33rd degree Freemason, by the way. And this book is called Mystic Masonry. It's a great book. And if this sort of thing interests you, I recommend that book, because this book talks about how there is a secret doctrine that underlies all other doctrines, and that basically there are two versions of all religions, including Christianity: an exoteric version, or a version given to the public, given to the masses, and then a secret hidden tradition reserved for the select few or the initiates. So that's going to play a little bit into what we're talking about today, because we have to understand there's different ways to interpret and understand religion. So anyway, let's just start here. So Graham, in this article, is the one who's arguing that there is an underlying truth to all religion. And he's responding to Matthew. Matthew is the person who says, well, there isn't. Well, so who is right here? So Graham is saying that Matthew says that there are many differences between various religions, but these are, of course, what perennialists would call the outer layers, not the core. He doesn't actually say what the central core of perennialism is that he is denying. I'll put it into my own words. So basically, Matthew is saying, hey, look, if you look at all the religions, they are massively different. They do not share a common underlying truth. And that's absolutely true if you're looking at the exoteric version, or the version that is given to the masses. And what I mean by that is there's two different ways to look at religion. You either look at religion and you take it literally, or you look at it symbolically and metaphorically. So for example, let's use the Garden of Eden. If you're taking a literalist, exoteric interpretation of the Garden of Eden, well, then you believe God created Adam and Eve, and in the Garden of Eden, created the whole world in 7 days. They ate from the tree of knowledge because of Satan and was rejected, was cast out, etc. You believe that that's literally true. Now, if you take an esoteric interpretation, you don't believe that literally. You say, what does that stand for? For example, the Garden of Eden might represent a lower state of consciousness, and eating from the tree of knowledge can represent gaining awareness of the self, exiting the Garden of Eden to enter into the outer world, which represents an expanded field of consciousness. That's just one example, one interpretation. You can think of many, but there's the major difference. So Matthew is saying all religions are wildly different. They don't share a common theme. And yes, that is true if you're looking at all of the exoteric or literal interpretations. And that's right. And that is why, however, that's why we have so much division and hatred in the world, because these religions are incompatible with each other if they are taken at face value. That's why you have so much conflict with people unaliving each other to massive degrees because these religions are so incompatible with each other. But we have to understand that we can have another interpretation of these religions that unify them. So let's continue. Basically, what Graham here is saying is that, like, yeah, of course you're going to think all religions are fundamentally different if you're looking at them at face value, which I completely agree with. If you're looking at them at face value, they're wildly different. But what Graham is saying is that there's an underlying truth which forms perennialism. And so what is that underlying truth? What is that core? What is that universal, secret, hidden thing that underlies all religions? Here is what Graham says is that universal underlying truth that unifies all religions, that underlies all religions. That there is an ultimate ground of being, which is the source of everything that exists, which mysteriously is complete nothingness. Paradoxically, this nothingness can also manifest itself as a complete fullness and unified oneness, a creative principle capable of manifesting the totality of everything that exists. So according to Graham, this is the underlying truth of perennialism, that there's a ground of being, which means a source of all existence, that is both a nothingness and a fullness and a oneness that is capable of manifesting everything that exists. Now, we're going to look at why he thinks this underlies all religions. But before we do that, I want to show you how this applies to the Neogenian system, because this absolutely applies to the Neogenian system. It agrees with all of these things. But you'll notice that in the Neogenian system, we're about meta-rationalism, which means understanding metaphysics rationally, which means we want to understand exactly how reality operates with mathematical precision. We want to bring these immaterial and metaphysical aspects of reality out of the realm of faith and mysticism and into the realm of logic, reason, and mathematics. That doesn't mean giving up intuition or mystical experiences. Those are integrated in our system, but we have to rigorously understand these ideas. And so what I mean by that is when you say something like, well, there's a source of everything, and it's a complete nothingness, but also a fullness, and also capable of creating everything. That's nice to say, but you have to explain how and why that is possible. So I agree with it, but I agree with it because I've studied extensively throughout all my years and have seen how we can understand this in a mathematical and logical way. So let's take a look at this. Something that is nothingness, but also a fullness and also a oneness. Well, this is exactly in the Neogenian system what we call a zeta. If you're familiar, a zeta is a triple concept. It's a 1, a 0, and an infinity, all at the same time. Mathematically speaking, what does this mean exactly? Well, we know that this is a mathematical reality. I've done a lot of videos on why that is, but this is a mathematical reality. And if you take a system of mathematics that contains all values within itself, all those values result in 0. So if you have all values, that means for every positive number, you also have a negative number. Well, if you have every positive for every negative, what does that sum up to? It sums up to 0. Now, it doesn't mean they eliminate each other, but it means they exist in a state of balance and harmony such that they are able to nullify. They don't cancel each other out, but they result in a net of 0. So you have a single, which is the individual, the oneness. You have a single unified system because it's all of math that is everything, but also balances to 0. So you see how we can understand that this is mathematically speaking, and this is what we call a zeta, or the soul. This is how we mathematically define the soul. Now, it gets a lot more complicated than this, of course, because this relates to actually mathematical frequencies and sinusoidal patterns. Like I said, check out my book, Meta-Rationalism, the New Science of Mind, if you want to understand all of this in a lot of detail and have it laid out step by step with mathematical precision. So this is what we define as a zeta. But in our system, there's not just a single zeta, there's a multiplicity of zetas. Because logically speaking, if one of something is possible, then there's nothing to prevent there being a multiplicity. So instead of there just being a single oneness, there's a multiplicity. And this goes even further by showing how reality is both one and many at the same time. We have a network of zetas or souls, which is a single network, but expresses itself as a multiplicity of various nodes within that network. Okay, so it was a nothingness, a fullness, and a oneness that is capable of manifesting reality, the totality of everything that exists. So this is, in our terms, a mathematical system that contains all values, which is the fullness, that balances to 0, which is the nothingness aspect, that is an individual, which is the unified aspect. It is a complete total unity. Now, the important thing to understand about this is, as a system of mathematical information that is both a nothingness and a fullness and a unity, it can take on various patterns without violating the fact that it results in 0. So what I mean by that is I've given this, example many times before, but if you take a look at this Rubik's Cube and pretend there's a number written on every square, every cube. So let's say there's a +1, then a -1, a +2, then a -2, a +3, and a -3. So you have, for every, you write a different number on every cube, such that for every positive number, there's also a negative. So if you were to add up all the values of this cube, what would it equal to? Well, it'll equal to 0. Now imagine that you arrange the cube in a different pattern. Now what's it equal to? Well, it's still equal to 0. It doesn't matter what pattern you arrange it into. When you take it as a totality, a fullness, a wholeness, it's always going to be equal to 0. So what this means is that you have a system that is a system that is a fullness, that is a oneness, that is a nothingness, but is also able to take on various patterns. This is what allows for the creation of all reality and all existence, because in essence, this acts as the code of reality. So you know how, like in computer code, simply by arranging ones and zeros into different patterns, you can generate a whole video game world. Well, in this system, it's a system of mathematics that arranges itself into various patterns that generate existence and generate reality. To get more into it, this has to do with wave mechanics and Fourier transforms, because these mathematical systems gets expressed as frequency and sinusoidal waves, which are able to be projected. Frequency functions are able to be projected and transformed into space-time functions. But that's way more than we have time to get into right now. The basic thing that I am wanting to express is that Graham is saying there's a fundamental truth to existence. That is, it's a source of everything, that it's complete nothingness, but also a fullness, but also a oneness, and is capable of manifesting the totality of everything that exists. My point is, I agree, but one has to say how and why that's possible. Or else you're just going on faith or mystical intuitions, which we want to avoid. We want to be a system of knowledge. And as a system of knowledge, we must be based on logic, reason, and mathematics, while integrating intuition, of course. But let's move on. And so the reason why I'm pointing this out, by the way, is because what the Neogenian system is all about is exploring. So all these religions, we're going to talk about all these religions having this core sort of secret underlying truth. What the Neogenian system is about studying, outlining, and exploring that underlying truth with mathematical precision. And because of that, this is how we're able to unify science and religion as well. Because science is about uncovering knowledge about existence. Now, today's science is a materialist empirical paradigm, which is about mapping the material world according to testable data, dealing with the scientific method and just empirical means in general. In other words, just like religion needs to be transformed, which we're going to see, just like religion needs to be transformed, science needs to be transformed as well. And this is where our system of meta-rationalism comes in. But the reason why this transformation is possible is because it's based on logic, reason, and mathematics. So science can be transformed into meta-rationalism. Now, it's not, of course, that's not what it is today, but we could kind of think about how, in addition to religion having this core, science could have this core as well once they update their methods and understanding of reality to meta-rationalism. But let's continue. So Graham is saying there's this underlying truth that connects everything. He says in Hinduism, these are called Brahman, and at least in some traditions, Brahma. In Kabbalah, they're known as Ein and Ein Sof. Ein Sof is the absolute all to Ein's absolute nothing. So in Hinduism, you have the concept of Brahman. Brahman is the underlying reality or mind that is the ground of everything. And in Kabbalah, which is a form of Jewish mysticism, you have the idea, you have sort of a triple concept. What is, according to Kabbalah, what's the foundation of everything? Well, Ein, Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Or. What is Ein? Ein means like not or nothingness. Sof means end. All right, so reality is Ein or nothingness. Reality is Ein Sof, which is no end or endlessness. So basically in Kabbalah, reality is the infinite nothingness, the endlessness. And then you have Ein Sof Or, which is the creative power. Ein Sof Or is known as the endless light. And the endless light is what ends up generating all reality and all existence, according to Kabbalah. So you have nothingness, the endless nothing, the infinite, and then the creative power of this endlessness. And so you're seeing here, again, this is referencing that complete nothingness that is also a fullness, that is also a oneness, that has the capability of manifesting everything that exists. Which is, nice to say, but we have to show how that's possible. Like I said, in the Neogenian system, we show that's how that's possible through understanding sinusoidal waveforms and the nature of mathematics, being able to explore its various transformations. But that's not the topic of today. So you're seeing how he's sort of relating to this idea. First, he shows, okay, it's in Hinduism in the term of Brahman. It's in Kabbalah in the terms of Ein Sof. And then he continues by saying the Tao Te Ching opens with this statement. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao because it is a mysterious nothingness. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. That is the material universe and everything intervening. And then Graham says, note that here the nameless precedes the creation of heaven in spiritual realm. So he's showing how it relates to Hinduism, how it relates to Kabbalah, how it relates to Taoism. Something I want to mention here, though, that quote. Let's look at that quote a little more, because what I like to do is explain the whole point of the Neogenian system and meta-rationalism is understanding concepts like this in a rational way. So Instead of this like, it's the eternal Tao that cannot be named, the mysterious nothingness. I mean, it is true, but like, how do we know that and why? So the quote is, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. So basically what's that saying is that what the underlying essence of reality is, it's that which has no name and is a mysterious nothingness. Well, what do we mean by that? What are we talking about? Well, what that means, we already explained what the mysterious nothingness is. It's a system of mathematical unity balanced by both positive and negative values. That's what that is. But the reason why it's saying that it can't be named is because mathematics has to be understood in terms of itself. What I mean by that is anytime we start applying labels that are based on language to the underlying essence of reality, we're going to run into problems. We're going to run into interpretations. And so what I mean by that is Hegel's one of my favorite philosophers. Hegel basically said, hey, if something is true, it's true all the time. It doesn't change. But language is very static. It doesn't move. So his example was like, look, if you write on a piece of paper, it is day, right? Let's say it's daytime and you write on a piece of paper and says it is day. Well, you'd want to say that that's true, right? Well, his point is if you wait 8 hours, it's going to start to get dark. And so when it becomes night, what you wrote on that piece of paper, that it is day, is no longer true. And this is sort of an example of showing that truth is not something that changes. But if you try to capture it with language, it's going to fall short. So we have to understand things in terms of mathematical knowledge, mathematical information. And so basically, it can't be named because it isn't a human concept. It's something that we discover. It is eternal. It is timeless. When it says the named is the mother of 10,000 things, that is the material universe and everything intervening, this is basically explaining the difference between necessary existence and contingent existence. Necessary existence are fundamental truths that have to exist, always exist, and will always exist. Contingent things are things that exist, but they don't have to exist. They exist because someone created them or built them. Like a house is contingent. Why is a house contingent? Because it doesn't have to exist. You can imagine a world where that house didn't exist. But 2 + 2 always has to equal 4. It can never not equal 4. In base 10, of course. So these are the difference between necessary truths, which form the underlying ground of reality, and then contingent truths, which form the space-time universe that we exist in and the world we're able to experience, which is great, but it's not eternal. It's always changing. Graham says, from this viewpoint, everything that exists is a manifestation of consciousness. Therefore, that nothing exists, which is not some form of consciousness. The perennial philosophy is therefore an idealist tradition. So that's another aspect of the perennial philosophy, is that reality is mind. Now, technically, I wouldn't say consciousness per se, but that word is, so the word consciousness is used by people in such drastically different, but with such drastically different definitions that it's very frustrating. So it's a lot easier just to say, rather than reality is a manifestation of consciousness, is to say that reality is a manifestation of mind. It's a mental process. And that's important, because if we understand consciousness to mean awareness of awareness, then technically reality isn't a generation based on consciousness. It's a generation based on mind. What does that mean? It means it's immaterial, but it doesn't necessarily mean that self-awareness is entailed. It's not like there was a conscious being that went, oh, I'm going to consciously create such and such. It is a natural result of an unconscious mental mathematical process. But yes, it's idealist. Our system is idealist as well. What does idealist mean? Idealist means based on mind. So materialism is the idea that reality is matter. You know that because it's got the word matter right in there. Materialism. You can understand that by seeing that it's related to matter, materialism. Idealism is related to mind. You got the word idea right in there. Now it might sound kind of weird to be like, well, what do you mean reality is based on ideas? Because we're so used to like contingent ideas, like coming up with, oh, I had a great idea. I want to go to the park today. So what do you mean reality is based on idea? It just means reality is based on mind. It's based on an immaterial structure, just like a video game world. You could think of the code as like being its immaterial aspect. Now, of course, in real life, a code is not immaterial. It's based on like an actual material component, a computer, and all the hardware associated with it. But in an analogy, you can understand that the code of reality is immaterial. It's mental. It's mathematical. It's a structure of mind. So let's see. It says, at some point in the descending process of manifestation, individual spiritual entities are created. These are immortal, and in Hinduism are called Atman, the equivalent of the soul in Christianity. So in Hinduism, there's Atman, which is the self or the soul, the eternal self, the eternal soul. So remember earlier where we said Brahman is the ultimate reality? It's the ground of all reality, and it's a mind, hence idealist. So well, in Hinduism, particularly the tradition of Advaita Vedanta, Brahman, mind, is ultimate reality. Atman is the self or soul associated with every individual. And the goal of Advaita Vedanta is for Atman to realize that it is Brahman. In other words, for the individual to realize that it is reality. And this is, again, similar to our system, where each and every single one of us is a individual mathematical entity we call a zeta. But together, we form reality. We're a mental entity, a mathematical entity that forms a network that through the interaction of the mathematical energetic structures that exist within us, form reality, the wave function of the universe. And so it's about realizing that we are not just our ego selves we're not just John Smith, who is a doctor and is, 52 years old and has a wife and kids, blah, blah, blah. No, that's an aspect of who one of us might be. But what we actually are is the eternal self, the zeta, the soul, a mathematical being that is literally the ground of all existence when considered with the network of all souls together. So again, we want to understand these ideas in mathematical and rational terms rather than just saying it's true. Because how do you know? How do you know it's true? If not, it's like, oh, well, I feel like it is, and it seems like it is. Well, that's not a good way to base truth. That's not the way to find truth, because the reason why so many religions are in conflict today is because they all really, really feel that their beliefs are the true ones. So how do we know what is actually true and what isn't true? Using logic and reason and mathematics. So another more neutral term found in esoteric traditions would be a monad, a term coined or at least popularized by Gottfried Leibniz. So what is that? Well, a monad is essentially what we would call a zeta in terms of Leibniz's system. So just like the Atman is what we would call the zeta, the Atman is a very similar idea to the monad, just like the zeta is a similar idea. It is, so what does that mean? So who is Leibniz? Leibniz was a highly intelligent philosopher who discovered calculus. He discovered calculus, extremely highly intelligent, so you can see very mathematically inclined. And basically what he said was that all reality is mental. He was an idealist. He said all reality was mind, and that reality was built from individual minds that are eternal that he called monads. And so he basically believed that all reality was built from souls or minds that he called monads. Now, in our system, it's a little different than that, but similar in that the individual soul or self is a system of mathematical frequency patterns. So we do contribute to all reality, but it's in terms of the frequency functions within ourselves. So human consciousness is the end product of the descent of this soul or Atman through the various levels into a material body. At some point in consciousness, human beings start to feel dissatisfied with existence in a body in the material world and recognizes that it is a fallen soul and therefore seeks to return to its original state. That is the goal of the spiritual path. So there's also the idea of transcendence, of realizing that you're not your material body, that you are more than that, and seeking to return to an original state. So similar to our system, of course, more complex here, is that you are an eternal mathematical being. And as you interface with bodies or avatars, because these are just avatars, what you truly are is a zeta, a soul, a mind. When you interface with this body, what you're essentially doing is gathering training data. In other words, all the experiences that you have here are contributing to your growth as a soul, which means optimizing and transforming your internal frequency functions. And so all the different lives that you have, all the different iterations, are all contributing to your growth and evolution. And yes, at a certain point, the mind, the soul, the zeta, begins to become aware of itself. Just like you, as a human, started to become aware of yourself as you were growing up. Like, oh yeah, I'm my own person. I'm different from those around me, and I have my own likes and needs and wants. You start to become aware of yourself. At some point, the soul or the zeta starts to become aware of itself. You realize, oh, I'm not just my body. I'm so much more than that. And so you seek to understand yourself and understand reality better. So what needs to be understood here, okay? So basically what Graham's point is that underlying all religions is the idea that there's a source of everything that's also a nothingness, a fullness, and a oneness that generates all reality. That this gets expressed as individual souls, which incarnate into matter and eventually gain the desire to transcend the material world. This is what Graham is saying is at the heart of everything. So at one point in this article, Graham says, when basically answering the question, do all religions have this underlying truth? His answer basically is either yes, they do, or if they don't, they could be and they should. I'm pretty sure is his point. And this is my answer to this as well. So when asked, do all religions have the same underlying truth? If you look at them at face value, absolutely not. This is why we have all the wars and the bloods, because they're incompatible with each other completely and totally. I mean, not completely. There's probably a little bit of crossover here and there, but for the most part, they're pretty much mortal enemies with each other in a lot of traditions. So on face value, absolutely not. But if we peel back the layers and look at the underlying core, the idea in my point of view is that they can be interpreted such that they are expressions of this core underlying truth. So what I mean by that is ultimately it doesn't matter. It's kind of like the question, did Jesus really exist? It's an interesting thing to think about, but ultimately it doesn't matter. What matters is what we can learn from what he said. And the things that are positive we can learn from, and the things that are maybe outdated or don't really apply, we can be like, okay, that's not great. But whether he existed or not doesn't really make a difference. It's interesting to think about, but ultimately it doesn't make a difference. So when it comes to these mainstream religion, or just religion in general, the idea is it all based on the same underlying truth? Doesn't really matter. What matters is that it can be. All of these systems can absolutely be interpreted such that they are compatible with each other. Like, for example, whether you're talking about Brahman or Jehovah or Allah or Ein Sof or whatever word you want to apply it to, you can transform an understanding of religion such that, oh, well, this all represents the same concept, the underlying ground or essence of reality. And thus, we're using these stories as symbols and metaphors to represent an underlying truth. And once this is the ultimate way to sort of have your cake and eat it too. Because a lot of people are like, oh, we need to get rid of religion. We need to get rid of religion. We need to get rid of religion. Well, look, here's the thing. You can't get rid of religion. That's not how reality. Remember, energy can only be transformed. It can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. Same thing with psychological structures in the mind. If you have something that is in your unconscious, you can't just get rid of it. You have to understand it and find out how to work with it and transform it. Basically, if you have something that's causing you an issue, you have to learn how to transform it so that you're working with it, so that you're dealing with it in some way. So what I mean by, let's say you have an anger issue and you've repressed that. If you have an anger issue and you repress it, and repress means that you are denying that you have it without knowing that you actually do. So repression is you are relegating it to your unconscious, but you don't even know that you did it. That's different from suppression. Suppression is when suppression would be like, oh, I know I have an anger issue, but I'm going to ignore it. That's what suppression is. Repression is your mind has pushed it away to such a degree where you don't even know that you have an anger problem anymore. You do, but you've buried it so deep that you don't even know it. So if you have repressed issues, it doesn't matter if you deny them or not. They're still there. They still exist, and they're going to wreak havoc on your life. It's going to destroy your life. It's going to cause addiction, angry outbursts. All these negative aspects can occur. What one needs to do is integrate it, which means understanding it and working with it. So instead of going, oh, I don't have an anger problem, it's about being, oh, I do have an anger problem. What can I do about this? Can I work with a therapist to try and mitigate it? Can I get out my aggression through, let's say, channeling it into productive activities like joining an activist group, or maybe like creating metal music that lets me express my anger in a productive way? You see, you're transforming it rather than just trying to be like, I don't have an anger issue. So the same idea kind of applies to religion, because the world is like a collective psyche, and every individual psyche contributes to the collective psyche. And so when you have the idea of religion, you can't just get rid of it. You can't just snap your fingers and make religion vanish. It's just not possible. Just like you can't snap your fingers and make your unconscious content just vanish. You have to work with it. You have to understand what to do. So when it comes to reforming or transforming religion, what we can do is look at these systems, and explicitly transform them such that their adherents, the followers, realize explicitly and consciously, they realize, oh, our tradition is an expression of this underlying truth. When I'm talking about God, I know that I'm really talking about the source of reality. When I'm talking about Jesus Christ and salvation, I know that I'm really talking about Christ consciousness, or an expanded state of awareness, or whatever. And I know that when I go hang out with my Hindu friend who believes in Brahman, he realizes that it is an expression or a way of talking about the same thing that I'm talking about. So that way, we can all have the traditions that people, you can use the religious symbolism, the religious deities, the religious books, as long as the books have to be updated and reformed because there's a lot of terrible things in some of them. But, the parts that are still positive, these can be all interpreted such that we're now moving from that exoteric outer interpretation to the esoteric inner interpretation, but in a way where it's given to everyone rather than just the initiated or the select few. Now it's sort of what is secret is now given to all. And that's a large part of what my channel is about, by the way, is about, having what is considered hidden knowledge accessible to everyone so that we can create a new earth and a new world, and understanding that hidden knowledge in terms of logic and reason and mathematics as well. But once we do this is how we can have many different religions, but still have them unified. So this brings us to the concept of a one world religion. I wouldn't, really call it a one world religion, but that's what, like in Christianity, one world religion is like, oh, this feared concept. Well, what is a one world religion? Well, we can understand a one world religion not to mean there is only one belief system that everyone adopts, but rather that every religious tradition recognizes the one truth that underlies it all. You see the difference? It's not like, oh, we're coming up with this new religion that everyone has to adhere to. Everyone has to change their religion to this specific thing. It's completely new. It's completely different. This is different, where it's saying that all religious traditions in their diversity explicitly recognize the one universal truth that connects them all, such that they realize that these are just expressions and interpretations and can retain all the positive traditional elements while recognizing they're a symbolic expression of an underlying truth. So this is how we can understand a one world religion, not meaning everyone believes, everyone has the exact same rituals and whatever, but rather that there's an underlying thread that unifies everything together. And so basically what our system is, the Neogenian system, is about understanding that thread in itself. Like outside of all the symbolism, outside of all the mystical aspects of it, looking at it with precision. Basically, what our system is about studying that core essence of reality, that core truth, similarly to how science studies the physical world, with that much rigor and precision. But we go further because we are a system of rationalism that's incorporated within our meta-rationalist system, which means we're studying things to such a degree where we are using and basing our system on necessary eternal deductive truths. So anyway, where our system falls in is studying that truth in itself with precision, rationally and mathematically and logically. Whereas other religious traditions may not be so interested in that and would and instead interpret things in terms of symbolism. So that brings us over to science as well, because religion is usually a system of faith. The Neogenian system is, of course, not a religious system. It's a knowledge system. And then science is an empirical system based on the senses. But you can see how this is also could be compatible with science. So just like religion needs to be transformed or reformed, science would need to be transformed and reformed as well, where it's based on logic, reason, and mathematics rather than empirical testing and observation. And then it would just be incorporated into meta-rationalism. And so it would incorporate itself into meta-rationalism and understand, oh, these core essential truths of reality aren't something that I just have to have faith in. It's something that I can know mathematically, rationally, and logically. So that's how you not only unify religion, but you unify science and religion and really all thought systems in general can be unified in this way. Because this underlying truth doesn't just apply to religion, it applies to all thought systems. It applies to all thought systems, including science, when they are transformed and interpreted in this way. This is why we can have like a one world religion. I don't like calling it that, but that's what, people have called it. So the other thing to think of is like how fearful Christianity is of a one world religion, which is right there should be a huge red flag. Christianity the modern interpretation of Christianity does everything backwards. It says that you're dirty, sinful, and flawed, that you're not divine, that you need to worship a God to have salvation or you'll burn in hell. They fear the idea of unity. They fear the idea of acceptance of those who express themselves in ways they don't like. It's all about fear, division, and denying your divinity, which is completely the opposite of what a true healthy religion should do, which should be about you expressing and understanding your divinity within yourself. So the question here is, one thing that I want to make clear, right? Because there's this idea of, do all religions have the same underlying truth? And I said this already, but I just want to emphasize it again. When you're looking at it at face value, absolutely not. But could they? Yes, they absolutely could. If they are interpreted in another way, they can absolutely be based on the same underlying truth, whether you call it heaven or nirvana or paradise or the source or whatever. If we reinterpret these ideas, but they have to be reinterpreted. You can't just slap a different name on it. You have to be like, for example, karma. I'm just using this as a random example. Like, how would we reinterpret karma? Well, karma is the idea. It's called the law of cause and effect. And it's basically the idea of the choices that you make in this life have an effect on your next life. But it's almost always coupled with a ethical element. Like, oh, it's about being a good person or a bad person or blah, blah, blah. Well, this poses a lot of problems. It leads to a lot of issues. There are two major issues with it. The first issue is that no rational mechanism for how this works can ever be provided. Like, how exactly does this work? And second is that it leads to a lot of negative implications as well. So, for example, let's say it can remove empathy. So let's say you see someone that's getting robbed or something. You might think, oh, well, karma, they must have been a bad person in the past life. They're just getting what they deserve. So you see that there are a lot of negative aspects that come with karma. But we could reinterpret karma as literally the understanding that, because it is true, that our actions in our life affect our next life. But it doesn't have an ethical component to it. It's not being about a good person or a bad person. I mean, we should strive to be a good person, but when we're understanding and how good and bad is defined, that's a whole topic for another video. It has to do with like unity and division. But essentially, when we interpret karma this way, we would interpret it as the fact that our actions affect our next life cycle. Meaning, though, that it's not about ethics. It's not about whether we do good things or bad things or whatnot. It's about, like I said before, how do we understand this in and of itself? Well, we can understand that we are mathematical beings that are going through a process of evolution and transformation. When we have life cycles that are associated with an avatar, we're gaining knowledge and information that is contributing to our evolution as a soul. And this will impact our next life cycle because we're going into another life cycle with new information, new knowledge, new experiences. It gets filtered out consciously because of the filtering mechanisms of the brain. It has evolutionarily has adapted to do that, but it remains in our unconscious mind in the background. So this process, my point is, as just an example, if we wanted to say, make Buddhism compatible with the underlying truth of reality, we could define that process of information gathering towards the optimization of the soul that affects subsequent life cycles as being karma. So you see, we're changing. It's no longer about ethics, and now we're rationally defining it. But we could use the word karma, and it would still fit within that tradition with a new understanding. Same thing like with nirvana. Instead of nirvana being understood how it is understood traditionally, we could understand it as being associated with the source, the underlying unified aspect of reality that is foundational to everything. That could be interpreted as nirvana. If we change some of the ways nirvana is understood at a face value way, we can understand how it's applicable to this new. So do you see what I mean? In that a lot of these systems are already set up for being interpreted in a new, positive, healthy way. It's about bringing these religions into the future. And it would be great if we could just snap our fingers and move on from religion, but we have to go through that transformative phase. Humanity has to go through that journey of metamorphosis. And it's in that stage right now where religion still exists, but it has to be transformed to ultimately be overcome. Yes, we will ultimately overcome religion, but we have to go through that process of transformation. Because what else are you going to do? If you just if you just be like, oh, we're going to ban this religion, well, those people are probably going to get pretty mad. And how are you going to enforce that? And how do you think those people are going to respond? It's not going to be great. So rather, it's about understanding how this energy works and how to work with it, how to integrate it, how to transform it so it becomes healthy and we're able to unite together under these common ideas that are ultimately about unity and understanding. So the main idea here is there an underlying truth to all religions? The answer is, it doesn't really matter. It's likely that many religions were inspired by this underlying truth and then got twisted. That's likely. It depends very much on what religion. Are we talking about Christianity? Are we talking about Hinduism? Are we talking about Buddhism? Are we talking about paganism? Like what system are we talking about here? We have to get, it's very difficult to just put a blanket statement like, oh yes, all religions are founded on one underlying truth. It's more likely that many of them started out through individuals having an intuition about what reality is, trying to express it in some way that people can understand it, and then it just becoming totally twisted like a game of telephone. But we can bring it back to those roots, and even if those roots were never there, we can reinterpret systems in terms of that foundational truth and essence of reality, such that we're able to exist with diverse backgrounds and traditions and rituals, but with that underlying unifying understanding. And then, of course, there's the Neogenian system, where you can understand that truth directly, logically, and mathematically, bypassing the symbolism that can lead to misinterpretation, just the direct study of the thing in itself. So the world can be united under this idea, but we have to stop associating it with so much fear, like, oh, the one world religion and the rise of the Antichrist and the end of the world and the apocalypse. It's has been presented in such a negative light, which is so funny if you look at it. Why would unity be looked at as such a negative thing? Why is knowledge looked at as such a negative thing? Why is empowerment of the self and the community looked at as a negative thing? It's because these are evil. Most of them are systems that have been twisted and manipulated to be systems of control, not systems of enlightenment, not systems of empowerment, but systems of control and manipulation. And they want to demonize anything that would threaten that control and manipulation. That's why it's so feared. Because if everyone was based on the same truth, it would mean that truth wouldn't be monopolized by a single entity. Because right now, Christianity would claim, oh, well, we hold the only truth. We are the ones in power. It's the Christian church that are, the chosen ones of God, and we have exclusive access to what is true. It's a very elitist stance rather than being like, oh, we all have access to that truth. And we can use different symbols to represent those truths. And guess what? It's not the end of the world. If your symbol is a little different than my symbol, as long as they mean the same thing, who gives a shit? People have become so fractured and divided, which is why it's so important to remember that this is why I say we're only going to have a new world when we have a new consciousness. For true, lasting, sustainable change, new consciousness is required, which entails the transformation of religion. You can't have any, it doesn't matter what kind of legislature you pass, what kind of laws you pass. These can be helpful and lead to temporary solutions, but they're ultimately band-aid fixes, and only true, lasting, sustainable changes will come through the elevation of consciousness. Because an elevation of consciousness is required to some degree to have lasting change. And that's what transforming religion is about bumping it up to the next level. Bumping it up to, and of course, it's not like, oh, everyone's going to study the Neogenian system, because there's a lot of people who don't give a crap about mathematics and all that. And, that's fine. But for those who don't want to do that, they can begin to understand the truth and essence of reality through realizing, oh, these are symbols and they represent something more fundamental. And I realize that. I consciously acknowledge that. And that way, we can really begin creating a new world where we are globally united under a teleocratic planetary civilization. Teleocratic planetary civilization. Telos means purpose. So it is a purposeful society. Purposeful world. What purpose? To maximize the quality of life for everyone. So we can build a world where each and every single one of us has the best possible life. And right now that sounds like a utopia and a pipe dream, but God, it's so stupid. It should be so obvious. The idea that everyone should have the best life possible should be obvious. And it's important that we recognize that it is a possibility. Because until we recognize it's a possibility, if we don't recognize that, it won't be created. That's what it means by the kingdom of heaven is within you and all around you. It's a state of mind that can become realized all around us when we actualize it. That's what we can do. That's what we have the power to do. Not as Christians, but as Christs. Not as humans, but as souls. We are all together, united in this purpose. That's what brings us together. To make life better for us and each other. Is that so crazy? Is that so horrible? Is that so sinful? No. And any system that is telling you that is a satanic system, an evil system, a system of division, a system of control, a system meant to manipulate you, a system meant to take power away from you, to strip you of your power, to use your power for its own gain and its own ends. So let's ditch all that and start transforming ourselves, transforming the world, transforming the universe. I hope you enjoyed this, my friends. I have a lot more videos. Check them out all on my channel. If you enjoy my work, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a member. You can hit the join button right below this video on YouTube and check out all the different perks you get. You get access to all of our members only videos. There's a new one every single week. You get access to our Discord server where we have weekly Neogenian classes and study groups. Check it out. There's a lot of different things you can check out there. Remember, if you enjoyed this stuff, if you want to know more about this, check out my new book, Meta-Rationalism, The New Science of Mind. It is available at the link in the description of this video. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Nucelina, Christopher, Eon, and Vanessa. Thank you very much.